Hello dear Sphere, my name is Squid and today I'm going to be doing something a little bit different. When it comes to media discussion, I've heard the phrase intelligence is knowing that Frankenstein is the doctor, not the monster. Wisdom is knowing that Frankenstein is the monster. I'll admit, I've never really put much thought into the saying until relatively recently, when I saw a discussion paying how Victor Frankenstein was a negligent abuser, and the monster, whom I'll be referring to as Adam for clarification, and due to a quote from the book, I ought to be thy Adam, but I am rather the fallen angel, being an innocent victim, which I disagree with. I find that people like a character, they at times ignore their harmful traits and actions. And I especially think this is true if a villain is sympathetic, as it is easier for us as the audience to understand and justify their actions. I am self-aware enough to realize that perhaps I'm doing the same thing for old Victor, and we'll concede that the creation of Adam in the first place was extremely negligent. However, it was with good intentions, as the old saying goes. If Frankenstein was successful, he would have made the biggest scientific and medical discovery in not only his time, but even compared to our own. Now, before I get into the weeds of all this, I do have a confession to make. The version of Frankenstein I own is the Junior Classic for young readers. It's the one I had since I was a kid and the only version I own. I do believe that is a worthy substitute, as I own both the Junior Classic version and the original version of The Call of the Wild. And the main difference is that the grammar and details are simplified to be more digestible for a younger reader. There aren't any alterations to the actual story itself, no all the dogs live happily ever after, or such other alterations. I will concede that I'm basing this on, while a faithful adaptation is still an adaptation. Who knows, perhaps my view of the story has been muddled by said adaptation and the conversation I'm hoping to make about how we consume sympathetic characters is instead altered to what is lost through adaptation of a work. In any case, I'll be moving forward on the assumption that I haven't been deceived by my version of the story. Starting with how Victor was an abuser, while I admit that the creation of Adam, good intentions or not, was a bad idea. I do think people are rather harsh to Victor's reaction to his creation though. For context, it took Victor 2 years to create Adam, of which he'd hardly ate or slept. 2 years of rape and morgue robbing, blinded by both ambition and hubris. Only when he's finished and Adam has been brought to life that Victor can clearly see the horror that he's created, and understand that Adam physically is horrific. It seems that there is a popular misconception that Adam is just a perfectly normal guy with weird eyes. I don't know where the whole thing started, but I think it's a misremembering from the line, "I had chosen a beautiful face for him," outside of the whole context it was in, as the book continues to describe him having yellow skin that barely covers his muscles and arteries, along with whitish brown eyes and eye sockets. The point of this is to have Victor awaken from his 2-year-long delusion and for the first time truly see the horrific creature he's created. It's even more compounded when Victor tries to sleep this whole thing off, only be plagued by nightmares and wakes to an amalgamation of different corpses. It would be a bit insane if he didn't flee his home in terror. He doesn't return home until he meets his good friend Henry later that following morning, and by then Adam had left Victor's home. Shortly after returning, Victor collapsed and suffered a severe fever that plagued him for several months. Even if Victor had wanted to give his creation the proper loving guidance he definitely deserved, he physically couldn't, as he would have fallen ill either way. In this scenario, Henry would have come to Victor's place and found him unconscious with a horrific looking creature standing over him. Henry would have chased Adam out of all the same, and he might have started a manhunt to find and kill him with Victor being unaware. Even if Victor wanted to find Adam, it would have been impossible to do so, as Adam was living in a hut that connected to the Lacey's cabin. Add on to the fact that this is 1700s Germany, and Victor would have probably assumed that Adam was potentially hundreds of miles away given the time passage, and it would have been virtually impossible for Victor to find him. Another strike people seem to have against Victor is how he handled the trial of Justine. You see, William, Victor's brother, was murdered, and the lead suspect is the housemaid Justine. Now, Victor believes Adam was the murderer, and we do later learn that that is the case. People get on Victor's back for not doing much during the trial, however, there's not much he can do. If he said he created a monster 2 years beforehand and he came back and murdered his brother, people would have assumed he was insane. If he had said the murder was a random third party, no one would believe him, as all the evidence would point to Justine. She was spotted near the scene of the crime, She was unaccounted for during the time of the murder, and she had the necklace that William was wearing at the time of his death. On top of this, Justine made admittedly false confession, but a confession nonetheless. Without any competing evidence, it would have been impossible for Victor to prove Justine's innocence. The third thing I've seen be held against Victor is him going back on his promise to make Adam a wife. After Adam tells Victor his story, Victor agrees to create Adam a wife so there would be someone like him and won't be lonely anymore. This is despite the fact that Adam at the end of the story admits that he wanted to kidnap William, as Adam believed he was too young to fear ugliness. When William revealed that he was a Frankenstein, Adam ends up murdering him and framing Justine for the murder. Even knowing all this, Victor still agrees to make him a wife. Adam agrees to never interact with mankind afterwards. So Victor went to England to learn from a colleague who studied female anatomy, then went to Scotland to work on his next creation. However, this time he has to face the horror such an endeavor entails. Before he was blinded by the pursuit of knowledge and medical discovery, now he has to face his work with complete lunacy. As he worked, doubts began to spring into Victor's mind. He already regrets creating Adam, who'd murdered two close people in his life. What if his new bride was even more monstrous? Sure, Adam agreed to leave mankind, but what if his Eve didn't? What if Adam and Eve couldn't get along and they began to despise each other? Victor even feared they'd desire children and how generations would react to each other. Say these are just excuses to avoid giving Adam the companionship he deserves, but I'd argue even without these excuses, Victor has every right not to go through his biggest regret all over again. Not to mention, when Adam first came to Victor to make himself a bride, he first threatened Victor, promising to work towards his destruction, till Victor cursed the very hour of his birth. The entire time when Victor was working on his bride, he was in constant distress, worrying if he was working too slowly, and if that would bring Adam's ire on his friends and family. These aren't empty threats either. Adam fully goes through with it. The night Adam learns that Victor won't be making his bride, Adam goes out and murders Victor's lifelong friend, Henry. Months later, when Victor and Elizabeth get married, that very wedding night, Adam comes and murders Elizabeth. The constant death of family and friends is too much for Victor's father, and he dies a few days afterwards. With all of these deaths, Victor truly has nothing to live for but to avenge his family by slaying Adam. Adam is more than thrilled by this, taunting and egging Victor on as he chases Adam through the Arctic. When Victor dies in Captain Walton's cabin, Adam does feel some regret over his actions, but more so that his vengeance has left him feeling empty. Adam is a being that just wanted the love that he deserved, but was faced by hatred and ridicule at every turn. Now that the subject of his torment is dead, all that he feels is self-hatred. One of the main praises that Mary Shelley received from friends is how human the characters were. Victor Frankenstein isn't a mad scientist who played God and abandoned his creation when he was bored of it. Victor is just a man with a thirst of knowledge and desire to better his fellow man. The tragedy of Adam isn't just that everyone saw him as a monster, but that he eventually became the monster everyone saw him as. However, I'm more than happy to hear others' opinions on this fantastic work. Do you agree with my view of Victor, or has my fanboyism and media literacy blinded me from the objective view of the character? All discussions on the topic are more than welcome. In terms of channels, more videos are underway, so sit tight for that. I'm currently playing through the original Resident Evil on my Twitch, so come hang out if that sounds interesting. It seems that there's nothing more to say, but goodbye for now.